Hello, Hockey World. Before we get started, we're going to now go to Russ. Sorry about that bell. That rings a bell. We're going to go to Russ, who's got something to say.
Interesting. Eck has the Stanley Cup in the corner. I have one in my room that maybe I need to bring down now because my cat broke the tabletop one that I've had for like the last 7, 8, 10 years.
Like, get rid of the cat, man. You can't have a cat.
Anna, come on.
Knocked it off, and I couldn't screw it back on. It was over. But anyhow, let's talk about the NFL for a minute because we're always saying that quarterbacks need to bulk up and to be able to play in the league, they got to be able to take hits and everything else. Early part of Jets camp right now has seen Zach Wilson, who still has a great arm, all of a sudden lose some accuracy and overthrow guys, missing guys that he didn't even do last year. And the thought is maybe he did bulk up too much. And I can tell you that there were players that did that. One year, Tim Tebow did it when he was on the Jets because he was going to play H-back.
Remember him? Tim Tebow. That's a good name from the past.
Yeah. And when they handed him the ball, he lost all of his speed. So, basically they would just neutralize him at the line of scrimmage. He had no breakaway speed anymore.
Sticking with the NFL, I just had this. A not so pleasant subject, but it continues to be a bigger headache for the Cleveland Browns as woman number 24 and 25 come out to say that Desean Watson made them do things that they didn't want to do when he was getting a massage. And it's starting to sound, Kev, like he could get suspended for a year or more. And this, I'll tell you right now, the Cleveland Browns are in deep trouble because Baker Mayfield says he's not going to play. And even if he gets suspended for a year, they may not have a quarterback. They thought they were going to have 2 quarterbacks. Now they may have none.
Yeah, although I bet they find one. It may not be, a quarterback that that makes everyone else envious, but there's always quarterbacks out there that have had at least serviceable.
Fitzmagic just retired; he can unretire.
If they get Geno Smith, Russ, is that serviceable?
Oh, not really.
Yeah. But it's not like they lit it up with Baker Mayfield. Right. I mean, you know how I feel about him. I think statistically, he's just not can't keep up with the quarterback. So, I mean, it was a bad decision right from the beginning, whether it's 2 or 10 or 20 or 25. Doesn't really matter. I don't know why you would involve yourself.
Browns have everything. They deserve everything that's coming at them. If they lose money on this, great. If they lose a quarterback for 2 years, great. Maybe it'll make them think about it next time.
There are still people in the athletic world who, as long as you can help the team, nothing else matters. So
yes,
well, that's for sure. That's for sure. I didn't root for the Eagles for 1 year for 3 straight years because of Michael Vick.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, and the animal stuff. I couldn't do it. But he was a good quarterback with the Eagles.
He was
during that period of time. So I knew that much. All right, here we go. Let's go. Ready?
Yep.
Hello, Hockey World. It is Friday, June 10th, 2022, he said confidently.
I'm Michael Agello, and I hate yard work.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology. I like yard work.
Kevin, your yard work opinion.
Kevin Allen, hockey, but they have no opinion.
Sure. And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast at HockeyBuzz.com, coming to you from inside the house where hockey writers are supposed to be. We come to you every Monday through Friday to fill you on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we do need to get outside once in a while. But all right, so here we go. We're going to talk about last night first. We got to start there. But the big topic for today is going to be the summer of coaches because I'm doing a 3-part series. I know it's ambitious for me. 3 parts. I'm committing to it. The first part is and the 3-part series is called the Summer of Coaches. And that is what I've officially named this summer. I always, last couple years ago was the summer of goalies and the summer of, free agency. This is the summer of coaches. So we're going to talk about we're going to go into my first part today, which is the next John Cooper out there somewhere? We're going to talk about that. But we're going to start first off. We got to start with the game. 3 games now, Russ, in the last 2 minutes of the game that the Rangers have lost in a row to the Tampa Bay Lightning. So you feel Is it worse like losing this way, or is it like I keep feeling like, as a Rangers fan, it's like, geez, would you rather just get blown out than keep losing?
No, I think as a fan, you want to have a chance.
Yeah.
And they've had more than a chance.
Yeah.
I get it. It does get frustrating, but I mean, it's not like Shesterkin played bad.
No.
It's not his fault. It's just, that's the way these games go sometimes. The interesting thing is I get it why everybody would think now that Tampa's going to close it out. Now, the Rangers have been excellent in elimination games. Like, they've been like the best team. But again, you could say they haven't been facing Tampa, and I would have to agree with you. Still doesn't mean they can't pull this game out. It's just that's the Jekyll and Hyde nature of this Ranger team. But, yeah, I would say there's a trend growing here for sure.
I think it's the Jekyll and Hyde nature of the NHL playoffs. I mean, every game is a different story, and, you got to let it play out, although – this is 2 consecutive really good games by the Tampa Bay Lightning, and we had not seen that. I think now they've pushed it into, relying on all the experience they have at winning important playoff games. If you watch that game yesterday, they just played the way they need to play in order to win. And, the Rangers still had a chance to win that game. It wasn't out of the realm. But, the Lightning, that little edge, the Rangers, and I know Gerard Gallant answered this question in a press conference 3 or 4 games ago, and people brought up, are the Rangers still kind of learning, how to win in the postseason? And he said, well, because of the way we've won in the first couple of rounds, maybe we've sort of expedited the experience in them, and maybe they did, but it's still, they're still trying to figure it out a little bit, like, how to deal with these this situation. So I think that's the little edge that the Lightning have, is that they don't have to figure anything out. They already know the blueprint. They know what to do. So
yeah, and I think we've seen this like throughout the playoffs, because in the Toronto series, they were terrible in game 1. They were not great in game 3. They bounced back in game 2. They bounced back in game 4. Game 5, the Leafs came back. Game 6, Tampa came back. Right. In game 7, they shut down Toronto. So it was sort of an inconsistent effort, but when they needed to, they could rely on that reservoir of experience. They could tap it, and they had Vasilevsky, who I think stole the Florida series because they really played sort of close to the vest against a really good offensive team. In this series, the 9-day layoff, the rust in the first couple games was definitely a factor, and the Rangers had the advantage because they came right off a 7-game series. But ever since game 3, and more focused on game 4, where I thought they dominated. I don't think it was the last few minutes of the game. They dominated throughout. This game, Russ, I look at this game, and this was the missed opportunity for the Rangers, because not only did Strome miss late in the third period, there were 2 or 3. Panarin missed one right in front of the net. Fox had a close-in chance. There were 3 or 4 really gilt-edged chances in the third period that the Rangers had an opportunity to take the lead. They didn't, and then the unlikely Sergachev scores to give them actually it was Palat who deflected it, but it looked like Sergachev had his second goal. And to me, it was a missed opportunity for the Rangers.
Yeah, I mean, the way the first goal went in for both teams, some of their forwards are partially responsible for sort of getting in the way of the goalie or having to go through their legs or whatever, but it happens. But what the Rangers were successfully doing in this game was when you had told me that Tampa shut down the Leafs because they couldn't get in the middle, whatever, they weren't able to do that with the Rangers for half of this game. But again, with Vasilevsky, with everything else, with some missed opportunities, they were able to win it. They were able to seize it and win it. And I do think the Rangers do have a chance to win this next game just because of their comeback ability. I do think the fight at the end of the game was probably good for the Rangers, especially someone like Lafreniere doing it again.
I like that. I was
first overall pick fighting. Almost Stamkos was too, but still.
I think it will have no impact. That's what I think.
It might have no impact.
I think it might on the bench. I think it might on the bench in the sense that it shows that this kid is as invested as everybody else.
It's not the impact it has on this series. It's Lafreniere taking over the Rangers. Like
just in the locker room, yeah.
It's like him starting to take over the Rangers, which is what you need, what the first overall pick has to do eventually, right? Like, he has to take over that team.
You want him to reject.
I don't think he's close to taking over the Rangers.
Yeah, no,
not yet.
He's not even remotely close.
No, but he can sort of edge his way into the core group by like asserting himself.
Yeah,
that's fine. He's a 20-year-old kid.
Yeah, but the impact on the series, a team like
not the series. I just think in the locker room with his players, I think he earned some respect with that.
I guess so. But I agree with Russ too. I think it's important to note, even though I thought the Lightning have played well in 4 and 5, the Rangers certainly could have won last game, and I do believe they've got a chance to win the series. I mean, the Lightning have to continue to play at this level, and the one difference between this team and the last 2 years is I think we always expected the consistency of that Lightning team because of their talent level was so high. Their depth has been eroded. So now you think they can hold it all together, but you're not quite sure. We're still not sure what we'll see in Game 6. It looks like they've sort of pulled it all together, but we'll have to see because the Rangers are a very talented team, and they've got a goalie who can, steal a game at any time. So
there are very few cases, Kevin, of teams winning 4 in a row after losing the first 2. Like, that is something that doesn't happen very often.
No, I know. Although the winner of Game 5, is your wife close by?
Oh yeah, no,
so
she was.
78.5%.
But the winner of Game 5. But if a team wins 1 and 2 in a series, Kevin, it's like 89%. So where are we going to go with this? Like the Rangers won 2 in this series.
I think we'll go to the superseding. What happens once you've allowed the 2-0 lead to become 2-2, then we move to a different group of statistics. So you've already blown that. But
I don't know. I mean,
the important thing is,
the statistic is not based on that, though. The statistic is based on just flat out winning the first 2 games of the series.
But that didn't happen. We've moved on. I mean, now they're in. The Rangers now are in that lower percentage rate. So we've already accepted that. But if the
Rangers lose this series, like, I'm just throwing math out there for my wife. If the Rangers lose this series, that statistic will change. Because
that's true. That's true. Well, anyway, the bottom line is they have a chance to win it. I mean, they're a very good team, and all the rest. But the other point I was going to make, that I had in my notebook column. Yeah, it's true that it's 78 point whatever, but in this season, they're 4 and 3 when they 2-2. So when you win Game 5, so I say it all the time. Tell your statistics to shut up.
And they're 5-0 when they're facing elimination. So
and I think the Rangers will make another change too. I think Rooney will end up being out. They might, and I don't think they're going to reinsert Reeves necessarily. They might reinsert Dryden Hunt, who was pretty good with them for a portion of the year. There's a few things they can do because they do have some maneuverability here.
And I don't think anybody would be stunned, including the Lightning, if they lost this series. Like the Rangers are a very fun team, and they're dangerous. They're a dangerous team.
Yeah,
because they've got.
One of my thoughts on that. I do agree. I shouldn't have said I think Lafreniere is going to take over this team right now, but I do think that. To me, I always think about a first overall draft pick is they come into a locker room and there's definitely a certain feeling about that player, right? And is he going to be? Is he spoiled? Is he like this? Is he like that? And in my opinion, this is the kind of thing that I love to see a first overall draft pick do. I just like to see him throw it.
Yeah, I agree. I just think it shows him coming of age. He's come of age in these playoffs.
Yeah,
I think. Even with someone like Kreider would respect that. I think it's just a matter of gaining a little extra respect. I don't think, like Kevin said, I don't think it matters to the series, but I do think it matters to where he sort of stands in the locker room. That's all. The pecking order.
I wouldn't argue that. You're always trying to, carve out your piece.
Yes.
In the room, and he, probably made a statement. by getting in that fight, and we lost Eklund.
I just jipped out for a second. Do we think that there's going to be any kind of fine, and probably not suspension there? I didn't even know about this, but after the game when the fights did happen, Stamkos apparently they're saying that he spit at Lafreniere.
I didn't see him spit. I knew they fought.
Yeah.
I think there'll be fines. Yeah, there'll be fines because it's after the game ended. You're not supposed to have it.
Yeah, that whole spitting thing. I mean, that always reminds me of when you coach 7 and 8 year old soccer.
Yeah,
you can't ever have a line without somebody complaining that somebody spit on their hands.
Well, the only thing I factor in here, Kevin, I agree. It's sort of when the Brad Marchand licked Leo Komarov a few years ago, it was just sort of disgusting. But now in the COVID age, you spit.
Yeah, but honestly. With all the times we've interviewed Steven Stamkos, does he seem like a guy?
No.
No.
That's why I was a little surprised that what the accusation was, and then I watched the video and it looked like he did, but who knows if he actually did.
Yeah. Speaking of that, there's something I wanted to. Are we done with this or?
No, the one thing I was going to add, I felt like a mistake Tampa made early in that game, and we'll see if they correct it. They were relying way too much on Zach Bogosian, and Zach Bogosian was getting gassed.
Well, let me ask you this though, because I don't know the answer to this. Were they relying on him, or did he get out of hand? It felt to me like he got out of hand.
Maybe.
What else could they do?
That was the Zach Bogosian wanderlust that he used to have.
Yeah,
people
every time that he was up the ice, I'm going, what the hell?
Right.
Dennis Thrasher carrying the puck right there.
Cooper probably wanted to hit him with a cattle prod, but the thing was, in the third period, they didn't have the option because McDonough was out for most of the third, and they were playing Hedman and Ruda and Bogosian and Sergachev a lot.
All they had. That's all they had.
They had to.
I got to confess this, Mike. When that was going on, I'm thinking, Mike's writing this series off. McDonough's out. He's out for the rest of his career. He's injury prone. It's all over. I thought he wasn't coming back.
Right.
I mean, I'm going to confess that. And then I thought they're in trouble. And then he came back.
Yes, he came back. And honestly, the thing I thought about was Russ telling the story about Game 7 in 2015 when McDonough tried to play for the Rangers and he couldn't. I'm like, if he can't come back for Tampa, this is the flip of 2015.
It would be too. It would be massive.
Yeah. We don't know how serious he. I mean,
if he doesn't play in a game, it's a massive loss for Tampa.
Yeah. I thought there's a chance for you to be a billionaire, though, Mike, because of your great concern for injuries, which fits your personality. But if you could come up with an app that would create turn injuries into percentages of probability, and it would really fit into the way you view sporting events, like bettors and stuff. Like they would love that app.
Yeah,
Players will not like you so much.
No, players won't.
I will work with with ex-wife, who's a mathematical genius, to come up with an app, because if we could somehow plus 260, he's going to tear his ACL or something.
Yeah, so Eck has the rumor chart, then Mike will have the injury chart.
Yeah. Right. There you go.
All 5.
Anyway, if we're moving on,
go ahead, please.
I did want to briefly, before we get into the coaches, because then this sort of springboards into that real nicely. And probably you guys talked about this yesterday, but we had talked the last time I was on about Fluto from the Athletic. I almost said the Boston Globe again, but from the Athletic, who had the scoop of the fact that Pasternak was upset and that he was not going to come back as long as Sweeney was going to be general manager. And then subsequent to that, we had J.P. Barry saying he doesn't know what that's all about, that he's about to sit down to do a new contract with Sweeney.
Right.
And, I think it just speaks to the fact that this is a really dysfunctional situation in Boston. And, my feeling is, especially when I've read now how the fans feel about it, and I've seen some of the players reacting to Cam Neely's comment that they were afraid to make mistakes. And I think we were all 4 of us, certainly I know I was guilty of taking that as fact because Fluto is a guy that I know and believe he's a really good reporter and everything. And now I'm starting to wonder whether or not this was kind of cooked up, because players now have said, that's not quite how it was with Cassidy.
The interesting thing is that I heard Elliot Friedman talk about this. He said that, clearly the source for the Fluto Shinzawa story was not J.P. Barry or anybody in his reputation, because the quote referred to Don Sweeney as
88.
Sweens, and then Friedman asked to him and says, have you ever called Don Sweeney Sweens? Because they played hockey against each other, because they're both from that area of Atlantic Canada. He says, no, I've always called him Donnie. So clearly he was not the source, but whoever the source is, they must have an agenda here. And
I spoke to a couple of Boston reporters and told them what I feel is happening, and they didn't disagree. And it feels like when Cassidy had his meeting and went on vacation, that's the way it was. And then it also feels like Cam Neely was talking to Jeremy Jacobs, and he got Jeremy Jacobs all fired up. And then they both decided, hey, now you have to fire Cassidy, and Don, it's going to have to be you, and you're going to have to go to his house and do it. I don't think Sweeney's on the same page with Cam Neely at all. I don't even think they're close. And I think Cam Neely's been very volatile for about 2 seasons now behind the scenes.
And this is the thing I don't understand about their displeasure with what happened. Okay, we thought Boston was a borderline playoff team this year. I think most people think they overachieved based on a rookie goaltender and Allmark, based on some of the injuries. They're a one-line offensive team. Krejci's gone. They have a really great young defenseman in McAvoy, but they're not like a whole team. They sort of pieced together a second line with Taylor Hall and Haula, and signed a bunch of free agents which I don't think were good free agents, like Nick Foligno and Haula and a few others. So they, in a way, overachieved, and they forced a good Carolina team to Game 7. Why do you just completely destroy this team? Now, part of it is injuries, but really, if Bergeron retires and they trade Pasternak, you've just thrown dirt on this team that's been really good for over a decade.
Yeah, I can't explain it. I can tell you, and Eck would know this, at the end of the season when Boston came into Philly, I thought Cassidy did a great coaching job.
Yeah.
Look, the guy's injured. He had to win these games. He was winning these games. He didn't know who was going to be in net, because at that point Rask was up in the air, and he handled it great. And he was very honest about things. And apparently he was too honest, because that's something that Cam Neely didn't like. Was the
I think that's what's going on here, Russ. I think we have a little bit of New England happening here.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw this in, for those people who aren't familiar with the stereotype of New England is that you don't tell anything that happens inside your own house to anybody ever. There's a whole and I dated a girl from Rhode Island, so I can say this is absolutely was 100% the case, that it's like the tight-lippedness of it all. And the Bruins are a bit of a lone wolf type team at times. They really have their own. We talked about it to their benefit. At points earlier in this year, we talked about it, that I think that they just have a thing that they are the Boston Bruins, and that's all that matters. Like whoever they're playing, whatever happens around them, whatever's going on, it doesn't really matter. So
well, the thing is, Zach, and I said this on Wednesday. The seal has been broken on the Boston Bruins in terms of everybody taking less to stay in Boston. Once McAvoy got $9.5 million, they decided they were going to cut bait on Krejci, let Krug go to free agency. I don't think Bergeron, I don't think Marchand's still on a deal. I don't think Pasternak is taking $6.6 million. I think he wants 9.5 to 10. He wants what Mark Stone and every other top flight winger out there is getting in, and I don't think the Bruins want to pay that. So maybe that's part of it.
Yeah, I think that could play into it. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, Boston does things their own way. Cam Neely does things his own way, Kev. I mean, he definitely is a unique character in our game.
Yeah. I do think, if you're looking at this objectively, I think Sweeney has made more mistakes with this team than Cassidy has.
Yes.
I mean, if you look at the reason why this team has, and you got to prorate the 56-game season, but if you prorate that, they've had 5 consecutive 100-point seasons. It's mostly on Cassidy. He gets a lot out of those teams, and I don't think Sweeney is drafted particularly well, and he certainly has made some mistakes in terms of his signings, and even Taylor Hall, who was certainly a talented player, but has not been worth the trouble,
I agree with you,
for Boston. So there's a lot going on here, and I talked about it with another general manager who said he had no idea which way the Bruins will go with a coach. He said it's just really hard to figure out what they're going to do from this point on.
I think a lot of it matters if who's there. I mean, if Sweeney stays, which I think Sweeney is.
Yeah.
If he stays, and I get the feeling that Neely really likes Sweeney as a GM because Neely can be involved more. He wants to be a part of it too without the pressure of being the GM. I think, but Neely's not a GM. But I think that there's definitely
I
think differently. I don't think he likes what Sweeney's doing, and because he's not a GM, gets to do all this sounding off and have the owner's ear, and I think that undermines a GM.
That might be the case.
Do you think that Neely's considering firing Sweeney?
I've heard things the past couple of days.
I didn't get that impression, but I don't know.
I've never gotten it before the last couple of days. Like Russ, you're saying that they don't get it. I mean, I know. I
don't think they do. I think we're starting to see that there's some issues there because again, the whole Cassidy thing made no sense because it's like he got out of a meeting with Sweeney and everything's okay. And then 10 minutes later, it's not okay, which means there had to be another meeting and Sweeney wasn't in it. That's what it means to me.
They were talking about assistant coaches and things of that, who they were going to bring back and who they were going to let go for the next season. And then a week later, he's been fired. So, I mean,
while he's on vacation, always great move.
What I am curious about, and somebody in the chat is saying David Quinn as a candidate. Okay. Name me a name head coach. Maybe anybody will take the money, but a name head coach who will go into this cluster that's going on right now. Do you think?
Plenty of them will. It's the
you think what? If they pay him $5 million a year, sure.
Yeah, Boston's Boston. People want to be there.
Yeah. I don't think that's an issue either.
That's a big job, Mike. Everybody.
I get that, but
and a big coach that comes in might have more power than Neely.
Yeah, and the Bruins aren't the Ottawa Senators, or the Buffalo Sabres, or the Red Wings. I mean, they still have some ability. With this team, Swayman is a good young goalie. They signed Lindholm to go with McAvoy. They've got some pieces. I think their defense is still, pretty sound. They're just beat up. But those guys will be back.
I don't think Quinn would be good for Boston because I think Quinn is better with the team. Like if Quinn were to go to the Flyers, there's more young talent there. He could create a culture. I don't think you could create a culture in Boston when you have still the core there. I think you need more of a heavy-handed NHL veteran coach there who can really handle the veterans there because they're going to run the team.
Okay, so for the last half hour of the show, I want to get into this coaching thing. Every year we get around close to the draft, and every year, what do we say when the team doesn't have a coach? What do we say? Will that team have a coach by the time the draft comes around? Right? We always say this every year. We say the same thing. Will this team have a coach for the time for UFA? Will that be the case? And usually it is. Usually it is. Usually you would want your team to be involved. You would want your coach to be involved in your draft. You'd want your coach to be involved in, especially in your free agency, right? So that's like a major, even more important than the draft. Usually we have one team, two teams in this situation. This year, we have 7, maybe 10. The 28% of the NHL teams right now do not have an official head coach. We have three of them are interims. Okay, obviously, I'm assuming Edmonton, will be keeping their guy, but the Florida and Chicago are very much up in the air. And then the other
Chicago asked for and got permission on Richardson yesterday.
And then there's 7 teams flat out: Vegas, Boston, Detroit, Philly, Dallas, Winnipeg, that don't have a coach at all, right? They don't have.
Yeah. So, I don't think it has any impact on the draft act, but I agree with you about free agency because you're recruiting players.
Right. Yeah. But there's a belief that DeBoer is going to sign in Dallas.
Right. That's going on there. And, and we have a lot of coaches out there too, like, DeBoer, Trotz, Cassidy, Tortorella, Tocchet, Maurice, Vigneault, Quinn. We have coaches. Former head coaches are out there. There's a lot of them.
Babcock,
yeah, I'm keeping him up in his own world for now. much as Mike wants to stop paying Babcock in Toronto, I know you're going to be
no money out of my pocket. I don't care.
Right. So, all right. So the reality is you have a lot of old coaches, but when I talked to one GM I'm really close with yesterday, and I talked to two other people with other teams who said that the big question right now is, do you go with one of those experienced guys, or do you try to find the next John Cooper? That's what I was. And it's okay, and that's the big question, right? So, which way do you go, right? It depends on. Go ahead, Mike.
Let me just ask this, Zach. So, say we have the 7 teams and one more team, that has an interim coach looking for coaches. So that's 8 teams. Of those 8, how many do you think will be first-time head coaches? I would be shocked if it's more than 2.
In general, yeah, you're probably right. I mean, and I think 5 of those old coaches I mentioned, probably maybe a good 5 of them will have jobs. And I've heard we should have 2 coaches. That he believed he was just guessing, but he says I bet we have 2 or 3 coaches hired in the next 72 hours. That's what the GM told me, and I think that's a pretty telling. It was a pretty telling thing, So
I guess they must know if Trotz is going to actually make a statement. If he makes a statement, I could see 3 or 4 getting hired quickly.
He said Trotz was definitely one that everyone was waiting on, obviously, but he said Cassidy also people are waiting on.
It's changed since Cassidy came into the mix.
Yeah, because people also have a huge amount of respect for him, and they don't have a huge amount of respect for what they did getting rid of him. And
the only thing I would say, as far as finding the next Cooper, I don't know if any of these are the next Cooper because he won a championship at every level, and there's nobody out there that is sort of like a new coach that has won at every single level.
Right. So I'm going to give you 7 people. This is 5 different people I talked to. 1 GM, 1 assistant. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm not giving the guy credit. He's two GMs, 1 assistant GM, and then 2 other people who were just NHL people, and they gave me a bunch of names, and these 7 names came up quite a bit, and some of them I had never really even heard that much of. But the first one came up with tied to Detroit, actually, Kevin, and that was and also tied to Florida, and that was Rickard Grönberg, who is the Swedish.
Yeah, that's a fan. The fans want.
Right, they do want him. Okay, is that something?
Yeah, fans are. He's had success. He's actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's really not Swedish. He's Swiss. Canadian, right, or something.
Or is he's coaching in the Swiss league. That's what it is. Sorry, I don't know if he's Swedish. It sounds Swedish.
No, I think he's Swedish because he coached Sweden at the World Juniors.
He's an Olympic coach for Sweden too, right? Like he's been the.
Does anybody know if Grönberg's actually gotten interviewed? He's been the one mentioned for the last 3 years.
Grönberg apparently 2 years ago came around and did a tour of a lot of NHL teams and was interviewed.
And he was in the mix for Buffalo before Buffalo hired Ralph Krueger.
Yes,
but he hasn't swam up on the mainland here and done any real interviews. He may be doing Zoom interviews, but it just kind of seems like his name's getting thrown around. I don't know if I should take it seriously or not.
Yeah,
I do think you should take it seriously, just from people I talked to that he is out there and interested. And there are people who really think that he's got an interesting, he's got some kind of theory on coaching that it was explained to me very quickly, and I'll try to get into more depth on it, exactly what it is. But it felt to me, Kevin, I know that I didn't know the fans are calling from or what have you, but it felt to me like such a Steve Yzerman type move. Like it felt like just like he'd find this excellent coach out of nowhere.
We had and talked to Yzerman when he announced Blashill's firing, and we sort of floated the idea about that. And what he said was he wasn't real positive about it. What he said was he kind of talked about that he's going to be open-minded, which said, yeah, okay, I would consider that. But he also said that he has felt like since he became a general manager that he always does better. And he wasn't just talking about coach hirings, when he hires people that he knows.
Right.
So I think most of us have felt that he would be more inclined to look at Derek Lalonde, who he hired in Tampa, maybe even try to talk Rick Bowness, who he had in Tampa for 5 years.
Right.
And the other thing is we think, and again, he has not said this, I have not heard this, but with players, he likes to tie them up short term because he doesn't know where this team will be. I think he's going to try to do that with a coach too. I'm just guessing.
Interesting.
He's not going to hire unless he decides that he loves Bruce Cassidy or something. Then he couldn't do that. But I think he's going to try to hire somebody. So I think he may be one of the ones that takes a a non-established coach. So
Right. Okay.
Just a guess because none of that has come out.
Yeah, there's none, and I just a guess as well, but on like Florida looking at this guy too because of Bill Zito's connections with Scandinavia. He's got huge sources and he's always picked up a lot of Swedish and Finnish players. He represented them. He was obviously with the Finnish GM in Columbus because he has a really long connection with Scandinavia. So if this guy is thought of highly, he's somebody that I think would be thought of in Florida. The next guy was Pascal.
The only thing I'll say, there's going to be a learning curve for him. There always is for coaches that are unfamiliar with this league, and that's a tough thing. Yeah,
I just looked him up. He coached in Wisconsin in college, but not at Wisconsin, one of the smaller ones. That's the only background that he has. So.
Okay, interesting. Pascal Vincent, who is the head coach of the Manitoba Moose, is another name that came up quite a bit. And one person told me that this was he was basically going to Winnipeg, but then the Barry Trotz thing came out, and that's going to see that changed things around for a little bit. They still think he could end up there.
It's possible, but I mean, from what I've also heard about Winnipeg is that they really liked Scott Arniel and they hired him as an assistant, but there is a possibility that if they don't get who they want, maybe Trotz or whoever, that Arniel could be their head coach, and they just locked him up as an assistant because that's sort of a fallback if they don't get the guy that they really want.
Yeah,
he's on all the betting things. Vincent is, but what I've heard about him, because I tried to figure out whether he might be on the radar of the Red Wings, and people said people like him, think is going to be a head coach at some point, but they wouldn't be surprised if he ends up as assistant coach again and moves up that way.
There is a definite fear among GMs, at least the ones I talked to, of moving from an assistant to a head coach in the same organization is always a tough thing to do. We've talked about that before.
Yep.
Yeah. Once you've established yourself relationship with players as an assistant, and I think that's a lot of what's happening in Florida. It's like that it's really hard to change that around. We talked about the Bruins, right? One of the guys that's on the radar I heard was Jay Leach. Now Jay Leach is the Providence Bruins coach, right? So he's in the organization for sure. This is the kind of insular type, thing that the Bruins.
That's the same thing they did with Cassidy. He was the coach in Providence, and they just moved him up.
Neely loves this kind of thing. He loves to have you're a Bruin, you're a stay Bruin, that kind of thing. He has that's largely why he's on this. I don't think he's a big candidate elsewhere, but in Boston, he definitely has to be considered, I think.
I'm sure he's being considered. I bet you this is where Sweeney and Neely will split ways on who they want. I bet you Sweeney wouldn't want him.
Another name that was really good that I got a lot of positive feedback on was Mike Vellucci. You know who Mike Vellucci is? Mike Vellucci is the assistant coach.
Yeah, he's interviewed everywhere. He's everybody. Yeah, everybody knows. He interviewed last year too. So
yeah, he's a Sullivan, in Pittsburgh's back secondhand guy. He really ran a great team in Wilkes-Barre.
Yeah, he's interviewed with the Flyers. I'm pretty sure he's interviewed with Dallas. And like Cooper, he won an AHL championship. Right. He has been in junior hockey. He's paid his dues, and now he's been an assistant for a Pittsburgh team that everybody thought, overachieved this year with all the injuries they had. So, he's like a hot name for sure.
Yeah, so. He's definitely on that track. Then a guy who you're familiar with, Mike.
Can I say one thing about Vellucci?
Yeah, please.
I think as far as the Flyers go, if they're stating that they're not doing a rebuild, they can't hire Vellucci. Vellucci would be the perfect rebuild guy, but then you have to admit you're doing a rebuild.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. There's another guy on this list that the Flyers should be looking at, I think, but we'll get to him. But I also said in that, and I'll say the same thing about Vellucci, maybe not a big enough name for Comcast to think that they're making a big enough splash with it.
Yeah.
Comcast and that's where along the lines of what you're saying. Spencer Carberry, who is assistant coach in Toronto.
Yeah.
Now, many, many people have been telling me for a while that this is the next John Cooper, that this is the guy who is going to be, he's smart, he's brilliant, he's 40 years old.
Yeah. He's a rising star, definitely. But the thing is, he only has in terms of, professional experience. He coached at the ECHL level, but he only coached a year with Hershey, got coach of the year, and then moved to the Leafs as an assistant. He only has a few years.
I know. He's young. He's only 40 years old, but
so I think that he eventually, maybe after a couple more years, he could be somebody who gets a job, but I'd be surprised if somebody went that quickly for a guy who doesn't have a ton of previous experience as a head coach.
Also, would the Leafs be willing to let him talk to people?
They I don't think if he had a chance at getting a head coaching job, I don't think they would hesitate to let him.
Yeah, most of the assistants asked to be put in their contract that they, if they have an opportunity. So,
well, didn't we have a situation where their current Leafs coach was not allowed to interview, like when he was in?
Yeah, because he was the heir apparent. They knew that once they fired Babcock, Keefe was going to be the head coach. So they said no. But in this instance, I think they would allow him to talk and go get a job.
Another guy, Rusty, you and I are familiar with is Chris Nobluck. Who's obviously, his kind of claim to he was a Flyers assistant coach for a couple of years, but his claim to fame was he took over for Quinn when Quinn had COVID for the Rangers for like 8 games or 9 games.
Yeah, that was funny.
That did really well. In his first game, ironically enough, having been previously an assistant coach with Flyers, took the Rangers into Philly and beat them 9-0.
Yeah.
In that game,
that was a little bit of a statement, I think.
Game there, he is definitely one of the people who people do feel like is a rising star. He obviously is in the Rangers. He's obviously with Hartford right now, right?
Yeah, I thought he was good with Erie back in the day, and he had Connor McDavid and everybody there. The thing is, I think with the Flyers, I think it pushed him a step back because he was doing the power play, and then the power play wasn't good. So then people were like, "Oh, he can't coach," but he is a good coach. He just may not have been a great assistant.
Yeah, right. There you go. And then and finally, is another kind of name like Carberry is really young guy is Louis Robitaille, who is right now with the Gatineau Olympics, head coach and GM of that team. He's also only 40 years old. Hockey Canada loves him, thinks he's like a superstar in waiting. He coached the under-18 team for Hockey Canada. He's been the assistant on the U20 team.
Well, the U18 team wasn't great.
Yeah. But I'm not. It was a couple years ago. I think.
Oh, okay.
Wasn't the most current one. But I think he was assistant for the most current U20 team, perhaps. But he's no relation to Luc Robitaille, but another one of these super sharp guys like Carberry and Vellucci, who everybody seems to be talking about. Do we see anybody in here, Kevin, that's the next John Cooper?
Well, I think all those guys have the potential, but I think they're all in various stages. Like Vellucci is, has been in the business for a long time. People have a lot of trust. He's a guy, like by the time Cooper got to the NHL, he had won a championship everywhere as head coach.
Yeah.
The United States Hockey League, in the AHL. And he was like, people knew about him, for a very long time. When that job was opening, I actually pulled this up to see if I was right on this, and I listed him as the favorite to get the job. Like, it wasn't a surprise, because he is well thought of. And I think Vellucci in that group, he's been knocking at the door for a while. So, I guess he would be a guy that's similar because he's won and he's been at different levels and he's paid his dues. And then the last two, I think, probably a little young, but I hadn't heard their names, but I'm sure you're right on. I mean, if everybody's in love with them, maybe they're 2 years up the road. But I don't think an NHL team would hire them. And I think everybody's perspective is going to be different too. Like I've said, I wouldn't be shocked if Steve Yzerman, kind of hires a bridge coach,
right?
For his team. Thinking, we're still so far away that, why don't I, and why would guys go there? Why would a veteran like Trotz want to go? Like, the Red Wings are still a long way away.
They're a long way away, right? They still make that step. Now, the other thing that I think is interesting, and this is going to be part of my part 2 of my coaching series here, is what you and I have talked about before, Kevin, many times, and that is this cycle that happens with teams where they go from player-friendly coach to not player-friendly coach. Back and forth, right? So I'm trying to look at the teams, that the coaches who were released from these teams. And were they player friendly or not player friendly in our opinion? So let's look at that for a second. So Detroit with Blashill, player friendly, not player friendly.
Well, I would say he was very player friendly, and the word was that Steve thought that he wasn't hard enough. Like he was a big fan of Blashill, but I think he thought. But that's not what he said when he fired Blashill. In fact, he kind of resisted that characterization. That he said, I'm not looking, even though all of us had heard him or heard people say that he was unhappy with that. So I don't know what to make of it. But I would say, Jeff Blashill is a very nice guy.
Yeah.
And there were some rumors, but there always is that there were a couple of guys who didn't like him. But that's always the case.
Sure, for sure. In Vegas, Peter DeBoer. I've always thought of him as a player-friendly coach too.
Yeah, he's hard. Especially
Am I wrong on that one? Okay.
Oh well, he's hard on goalies. That's the only thing I know for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a wonder, but in Detroit, first getting back to that, I don't think Eiserman's going to just go for like a suddenly hard ass coach because of Blashill being a player friendly coach. They're not nearly at that point right now, right? They're just going to go for the coach at this point.
Well, I mean that's kind of what he said publicly, but we've also heard and I think this kind of leaked out from people within the organization saying we're going to get a tougher coach, so they want these younger guys to.
Right.
So I don't know. I just don't know what it's. I've said before.
Yeah.
After being in covering this league forever, I've ended up covering the team where it's so hard to get information. It's you just don't know what he's going to do.
Yeah.
So
the other way of approaching this too is to go through this list is the list of available coaches that we know of, right? In Philly, for example, they have Vivino. I thought was I didn't think he was a player-friendly coach necessarily. Russ, did you?
No, he's not player-friendly because
Mike Logo is really. I thought that
he might have one player, maybe two that he'll favor, like a Kevin Hayes. But in the end, he's mostly not player-friendly because he's very demanding, and it's hard to be player-friendly when you're that demanding.
But there are certain organizations that would follow up a player-friendly coach with a taskmaster. An organization like Philadelphia, I think, would follow up a tough coach with a tough coach. I think they'll stick because that's sort of the mentality of the organization. So that's why.
Well, they did have Yo in between who wasn't tough. So
he's an interim. They had no other.
Well, but he still was there.
I know. I'm talking about like a head coach that you've invested years in.
And they did respond to Yo for a while, a little bit early on because of that. I thought
for about 2 weeks.
And that's why I think Torts is going to be the guy in Philadelphia.
Yeah,
I still feel it's Torts. I felt it all along. I still feel it.
Yeah.
Now, Cassidy, do we know if he's a player-friendly coach or not at this point? Like, I'm so confused.
I think he's more of a taskmaster.
I don't know. I'll be honest. I really don't know. I can see both sides.
And it's hard to know. I can tell you he's a media-friendly coach.
Yeah,
I remember covering the conference final where we had Rod Brindamore and Cassie, and I remember I tweeted it, and I was stunned by how many people disagreed with me on this. Like, it was so refreshing to have Rod Brindamore and Cassidy because you could ask them absolutely anything, and they would give you some answer. They weren't revealing state secrets or anything, but they weren't offended by a question. They didn't get defensive. You ask them about what's going on, they just gave you an answer. So when you were talking about how Cam Neely felt about all that, I can see that because I find Cassie to be cooperative, as is Brindamore,
right?
So
does Rick Tocchet get one of these jobs? What are your? I think he does. I do.
I heard him in connection with Winnipeg is maybe a fallback if they don't get Trotz.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's going to get the Philly job because I think we would have heard something by now.
I don't think he's going to get any of them. I think after watching him a little more on TV, while he's been very good in his position, he's been very sort of down the middle, not usual Rick Tocchet. When Tocchet was with TSN, I felt like he had more of an opinion, and I knew what he was a little better. I think he's been playing it safe, thinking he's getting a coaching job and won't get it as a result.
Why? I don't think a GM is going to make a decision about how good he is on television.
Well, I mean, that's how they initially bring him back in. I mean, it happened at Larry Dirker. It happened in baseball. It happens.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people are going to remember him with the Coyotes.
He's got a lot of friends out there. Dockett does.
Oh, there's no question he has friends, Zach. But when you talk about results, the results aren't there.
Yeah, no, they're not. Well,
the results were there, and when he was with the Coyotes, they were much more competitive than they should have been.
Yeah, they overachieved because that wasn't a very good team.
Yeah, I mean, I think people thought that he did a good job there, and because I remember people being a little bit surprised that he was a defensive coach, because he was an offensive guy, and but he was pretty demanding defensively. He got Ekman Larson to play a different game than he was used to playing.
Yeah,
so.
he was loved by his players too. He's definitely one of those guys. He makes way. I'm tired of talking about how much sense he makes in Philadelphia, just because.
No, he only makes sense. He makes sense in Philadelphia to the old guard and the older fan base. He doesn't make sense to a lot of people in Philly. There's a lot of people not pulling for Rick Tocchet in Philly because it's too familiar.
I don't think it's because it's too familiar. I think the rub is will Tocchet play with Fletcher? I think Fletcher and Tocchet. I'm not sure that's a combination.
Well, that's a fair thing too, because Fletcher could be gone in a year.
I'm not so sure about that. Okay, Kev?
Yeah, I could take a stab at that question if you wanted to answer it.
Please.
Yeah, I know both players. The difference is this: Babcock was really disliked by players, and Tortorella, for the most part, is liked by his players. Right. Now, I know the perception is he's hard, and he is. He's hard on his players, but most people appreciate that they know where they stand with Tortorella, it doesn't usually spill out into the media. Sometimes it does, but not very often. And the Detroit players, there was a real, the only reason why there wasn't an insurrection in Detroit is because they won. And they wouldn't say anything, but the particularly the Swedish players really disliked him. Henrik Zetterberg never said anything because he's a total pro and a classy guy. But we knew in the media that Henrik Zetterberg did not like Babcock, did not appreciate his style. So I've talked to many of the older players who didn't like his confronting of players in a public way, or even in the dressing room in front of the other players. People have compared him to Scotty Bowman, but Scotty Bowman, he never spoke to players ever. Like he was non-confrontation. The only way you knew how you were doing was by your playing time. And Babcock, was, kind of engaged with his players. And Tortorella is engaged with his players, but I've talked to a lot of players on the Rangers who liked them a lot. And he's always got a lot out of his players. And I know there were players on Columbus that liked him as well. But, not everybody in the organization liked Tortorella. I don't think he was GM for
publicly campaigning for him. Atkinson and Philly's been public.
Well, I'll just say this about Babcock from my connection with him and with the Leafs. Even before he got fired and the stuff about Mitch Marner came out, Mike Babcock is one of the only coaches that I know that was punitive against a player, but not because of the qualities of the player, but because he wanted to get at the general manager. Lou Lamoriello claimed Frankie Corrado off of waivers from Vancouver. Babcock was pissed off that he claimed him without consulting him, and then would never play Frankie Corrado.
Right.
The Jason Spezza, he was signed by Kyle Dubas. They brought him in. They're playing the Ottawa Senators the opening night, his former team, and Babcock scratches him. That was the beginning of the end for Babcock. He's petulant. Yeah. He's, he's a great coach. And when you give him but the stuff that he pulled in Toronto, I think tarnished his legacy. And I don't know whether he'll ever coach again.
Now, we do have some breaking news. Kevin Weeks reports that the Sabres are going to retire Ryan Miller's number, which is cool. They should.
That's great.
I'm not surprised at that. I mean, he's, him and Haas, those are the top two goaltenders in Buffalo Sabres history.
Goalie recognition. Woohoo.
Yeah, it's nice.
This seems to be rare. That's awesome. No, did Babcock get worse, Kevin, after Detroit? Did he Did he?
No, he was pretty bad in Detroit with the players, to be sure.
I think
so
the
I don't
power.
know. I mean, he was always,
Yeah.
you know, he knew how to exert his power. He's a complicated guy.
Yes.
Because you know he wasn't. You know, I think I never had any problem with him. He treated me well. But I knew what the problems were with him and the players, and you know, I know Ken Holland appreciated how well prepared he was for games, and talked about that always, that he had never seen a coach so well prepared. But I also think he also had issues, and I know he had to kind of counsel him on how to deal with top players. You know, they hired him when he came out of let's see, where did they? Can't remember.
Well, he came from Anaheim before.
But no, they knew him before. Oh, he was in Cincinnati. That's what it was.
Cincinnati.
They knew him from Cincinnati because they shared a farm team. Okay, that was the guy.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
So when they got him in, but you know, right off the bat, like he did some things, you know, that were kind of offensive to Steve Yzerman, and I remember a discussion where, you know, Holland had to say to him, you know, when Steve Yzerman talks about the face-offs, we all listen. You know, we don't dismiss Steve Yzerman when he's wants to talk about face-offs. You know, so
yeah. I mean, he's an interesting character in that he's been volunteering his time coaching at another like this small school right somewhere right now.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a fascinating. I mean, I always like talking to him in the media as well. Like, I really thought he was one of the more interesting guys to talk to. And he definitely had, but you could see,
for sure,
you know. But I always Paul Maurice is another one who I put in that world of like there are players who absolutely like, in Tortorella's and Babcock's world where people absolutely hate him, but then there's a few people who love him, but he's really good with the media. Like Babcock or Tortorella is not really good with media, but you know, it's interesting with the media. I actually think
he's interesting. He gets us to cover him.
I think he's great with media, honestly. That's what you want. Right?
Bill put up 2 hours ago that Trotz spoke to the Flyers 3 times, 2 Zooms, 1 in person.
Yeah, well, that's a lot.
And the Flyers did a preliminary Zoom with like Cassidy to kind of like see when he's available.
Yeah.
And just to answer the chat room, I think Vegas is waiting on Trotz too. So
yeah, I can't see Vegas not trying to make a big splash and hire the biggest name that they can. If it's not Trotz, then they move on to, you know, Torts or somebody else.
I've actually heard Talkett with them, and I think.
Okay. Well, he's a fairly big name, but I'm just saying.
I think that's a pretty good fit, especially he's a big name now too, Mike, and especially in the market, like where he's been on television, especially. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm agreeing with you. What I'm saying is, I don't think Spencer Carberry or Rocky Thompson or somebody like that is going to be Vegas. It's going to be a big name because they're a big splash town.
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting thing about some of these teams that are like some of these teams that are looking for coaches: Vegas, Boston, Winnipeg, Dallas. They're all pretty good teams. Like let's not like.
Yeah, and Trotz is going to take a good team.
Yeah.
That's why I'm surprised that he's so heavily involved in Philadelphia.
I think that's about the money, Kev. I think Philly's offering him enough that somebody else is going to have to match that salary.
Yeah.
Now, sticking with the coaching ranks just briefly, because it's not, it's a goaltender coach, so it's not, big news, but I think it may portend to other things that this team does. The Leafs parted ways with Steve Briere, their goaltending coach. Briere was very close with Jack Campbell. I even heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, but because I'm sure they consult everybody when they go out and sign a goaltender. Briere may have been one of the guys who was in favor of them going out and signing Peter Mrazek, which would maybe indicate that the reason why they're moving on from him. They're sort of reconsidering their entire goaltender department because, in spite of the fact, their goaltending with Freddie Anderson and with Campbell has sort of been like middle of the road for over the last 3 or 4 years, and I think they're pointing that out. Vince is in the chat. I don't know. I'll confirm this, but it says per Kevin Weeks, the Sabres are requiring Ben Bishop's contract from the Stars. Well, that's to get to the cap floor. That's right. Clearly a cap, an LTIR move, because I think his cap hits around 5 4.8. Something
Yeah.
like that.
Who acquired him?
The Sabres.
Okay. Yeah.
And the Sabres have like 30 million in cap space. So, I'll look up Bishop's cap hit, but I'm pretty sure that his monetary amount is less than his cap hit. So that would be.
What did they give up for that?
Didn't say here. He's a $4.9 million cap hit. And the salary is 2.5 base, 1 million signing bonus. So that's basically like a $1.5 million coupon. Essentially, the cap hits nearly 5 million, but you're not paying out 5 million. So now Bishop is done. He can't play anymore. So that doesn't really help the Sabres in terms of their goaltending situation, but they're going to be out there looking for a goalie. And just hopping back quickly to the Briere leaving the Leafs, I think, is another check mark in the column of Jack Campbell not coming back. I think it's an indicator. It's not definitive. He could very well come back.
Is that really like his personal goalie coach?
No, but they were very close.
It could be a negotiating.
I know, but a lot of times goalies do get close to their goalie coaches, even if it's not their guy.
It could be a negotiating tool too. Like I fully think the Leafs want Jack Campbell to think that they can walk away from him.
I think that the Leafs.
I don't think you fire a guy though.
No, but I'm just saying no.
But I'll say this. I think that they want Campbell back at their price, and they're prepared to walk if they don't get him at their price. They like him, but I don't think they're sold on him being a number one, and they don't want to pay him number one money, which we talked about a few days ago, which in the debate I should have won, but you did.
I do want to mention this, and this is where I think the next road that guys start to get overpaid is the goalie coach. Because as an example, with the Rangers, Benoit Allaire, who's actually an assistant coach, has been there through Lundqvist and Shesterkin, and he makes a lot of money, and it's hard to argue the success. And he's a super nice guy. He's a very unassuming guy, but he's great at his job. And so you do kind of wonder if what the Rangers did all those years ago is going to start to become more of a trend.
Legend, though, Russ. He's a legend.
His brother was.
Probably his brother too, but no, they're both. I mean, I think I honestly put both of them in that world. There aren't that many of them are out there that are going to get overpaid. I don't think because there aren't that many. That name, the Allaire name, it's just it's synonymous with goalie coaches.
His job is safe, man. He has lived through all their head coaches.
Oh yeah, no question about it. It's not bad to go from Lundqvist to Shesterkin either.
No,
if you're a goalie coach.
No, but again, you look at Georgiev, probably helped him tremendously.
And Talbot, Cam Talbot.
He helped Valaket. He did because Valaket was pretty much a guy who was a journeyman, and then. And nothing else, you could count on Valaket as a Ranger beating the Flyers every time in Philly.
Did the Flyers re-sign Delabaugh, or did they let him
He's
go?
Still with them. I don't know. I guess July is when we'll find out.
But finally, when we have like 5 minutes, but I want to every week Kevin Allen on Friday puts out his notebook, and it is I mention this on Twitter all the time. It is my favorite column of the week. And it's my favorite column. It doesn't even have 32 points. I love it. I think it's great, and I think it's fantastic. And today you get into that the Oilers. Your title is Oilers must reconfigure their roster to add goalie and re-sign Kane. And I thought, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I think they already were going to have trouble trying to get a goalie. Yeah. And now they're going to try to get Kane. And we talked about that the other day, and I said, and I firmly believe this, if Connor McDavid says, I want Evander Kane, you got to make that a top priority.
You do.
It's just no getting around it. He is too important to the franchise. He showed what he can do in the postseason, him and Draisaitl both. I mean, there's a chance that nobody's going to catch them in the, for the point leadership. Technically, Connor McDavid is eligible to win the Conn Smythe. He won't. It's never happened. But that's how big a lead he has. Now, maybe if the Rangers get in, Zibanejad's 9 points back, he could certainly make that up. But, Cal McCarr, I think, is 11 points back, and he's next. And Kucherov is 12 or, somewhere like that, close to that. So, so you've got to do that. And, I don't know how much can you possibly, what would he take? Like, he may not want to come back, but I think that would be a better situation for Ken Holland if he goes and Connor McDavid said, like, I tried, I offered him $5 million.
Right.
And I think it was Mike who said this, and he's right on. You got to get him on a shorter contract.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
You're not.
Kane has of course had financial issues, right? So he had big financial issues. I don't know where they are now, but I think that he definitely.
I think he still has them.
He's going to be a guy who's going to need money. He's not going to take less. He's not like a discount guy, for sure. Right. But in his best interest, I think it would be to like sign a 2-year, $10 million deal with Edmonton and continue to be this player he is now. Because if he does
that's what we think. But he's going to look for more term.
Well, and just to put this into perspective. They have 15, they being the Oilers, have 15 players signed for next year, and they have $7 million to work with.
Oh,
right.
So even before that happened, now they're, they'll have some injury money and, but still, even before then, they were probably going to have to try to dump Duncan Keith somehow or Cassian.
Or maybe Keith retires. Maybe that was the agreement. He's got a year left, and I think the money paid is a lot less than the cap hit. So maybe, let's see, his money paid is, he's a $1.5 million base salary. The cap hits $5.5 million. If they buy him out, it will be negligible. But,
or you trade him to Detroit,
right,
or Buffalo,
right?
That can be done. I don't know, what is he, a modified or is he a?
He is a. Let's see here. Sorry about that.
While he's looking that up too,
I think Edmonton's got one more year with McDavid, and then he's going to ask out.
He's got a no move clause that he waived to go to Edmonton, so I think they respect. They have to respect it, so it's still a no move clause.
I think McDavid's going to be like, do what you need to do here, but I don't think he's going to take much more losing. Well, I know he went one step further, but he wasn't thrilled.
You got to get the goalie too. So
the interesting speculation that I heard was that with Bouchard sort of taking a step up offensively, that they may trade Tyson Barrie because Tyson Barrie's making $4.5 million.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and they have a couple young defensemen coming up, but really, I mean, they have to. That's like one of a number of moves that they have to do. That's why the Hyman contract, the Nugent Hopkins contract were really crippling. And even though they lose $4.5 million in useless Mikko Koskinen, they're still in cap jail.
Yeah, but that in retrospect, the Hyman move and the Nugent Hopkins were moves that had to be made.
Yeah,
right.
They're a very competitive team.
Yeah.
Now or more competitive team. Let me rephrase that. So you had to make those moves. And again, I still think you're trying to appease Connor McDavid, and McDavid's, I'm sure, like those moves. So
I don't know if they can trade Clefbaum's contract as an LTIR for somebody. I heard something about insurance being a problem with that one. But the thing is, they might have to go with Stuart Skinner and Mike Smith as their tandem because they can't afford to buy a goaltender. And that, if you get to the conference final and one of the reasons that you didn't advance was because your goaltending was not up to par.
I don't know. This is my thing with that, Mike. And I think, like Kevin, you're saying about Connor McDavid, you got to appease Connor McDavid. And the one quote that I heard that rang like a big bell throughout all of Alberta was when Connor McDavid said after one of the games, if you score 4 goals, you should win in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I wonder who's been listening to.
Yeah, I don't think it's the money. I think they'll figure the money out because there are guys they can move. Yep. I just wonder who you can get. I keep asking this. Who's the guy that everybody thinks
they could try and overpay Fleury for a year?
He's not going to go there. I just don't see him going there.
I think I'm going to say Campbell. If Toronto,
I don't think it would be that. I think they trade for a goalie who's got a short term, like a year left, and they try to like a Varlamov, like a Cam Talbot.
Yeah. Varlamov has already rejected the Oilers.
Yes, but Talbot, if they sign Fleury, Talbot has got a year left at less than $4 million. But wasn't he already there, Russ?
He was.
No, I think Talbot's going to stay where he is. I think.
I do too.
They were interested in Darcy Kemper, tried to trade for him, and he's a UFA. But if Colorado wins the Cup, they'll probably want to re-sign Kemper.
They're going to have to pay $5 million for a goalie. Okay, so they're going to have to pay $5 million for a goalie.
Well, maybe they're the ones that'll pay Jack Campbell $5
million. That's what I'm
They're
thinking.
going to definitely offer Jack Campbell. There's no doubt.
I mean, if Campbell truly is available, that's a slam dunk for Edmonton. I mean, that puts them as a serious contender in the West, and I think that's a serious shot.
And then we'll find out whether he's a real number one or not.
We sure will. All right, that's all the time I have for this week, folks. Enjoy the weekend. It's beautiful out there. Thank you, and make sure you check out Kevin's article on Hockey Buzz right now, and my parts 2 and 3 of my goaltending thing will be coming up soon. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you all on Monday. Maybe